In these uncertain economic times, it's easy to be worried about protecting your wealth, your hard-earned savings, and your family's financial future. Plunging interest rates, the devaluating dollar, and political unrest constantly threaten what you have worked hard to earn and all that you own. That's why now it's more important than ever to protect your assets and have the money you need to make your dreams come true. Welcome to the Global Wealth Fortress Report with successful global entrepreneur and wealth preservation expert Joel Nagel. Joel's helped thousands of people just like you protect what you have so that you can make even more and make your every dream come true. So, sit back and enjoy Joel Nagel's offshore expert advice on how you can live the good life at a great price, where the sun never sets on your financial fortress.
Hello. This is Carol Carter, and welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report. We have a heck of a show for you today because we're going to be discussing this article by Stephen Moore. The Great Biden Recession of 2022 is already here, and the facts and figures are stunning. And the question for Joel is, Joel, what are you telling the high net wealth people to do to protect themselves from the coming crash so that the rest of us can join in? Welcome from Vienna.
Yeah, thank you, Carter. It's good to be back. It's my second home here in Austria, back from Africa. We spent 12 days in Africa, and quite honestly, it's it was beautiful and glorious in a lot of ways, but also heart-wrenching in a lot of other ways. To see the kind of extreme poverty that's going on there. When we talk in terms of President Biden or what the Congress is doing to the U.S. economy, we have to remember that the old adage is when the U.S. sneezes, the world catches a cold, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing when inflation ticks up in these other countries, they really have no way to deal with it. Their inflation's greater, their devaluation's faster. So we worry about $5 gasoline. They worry about whether they can buy bread tomorrow. That's how stark a difference it is to see. And the minimum wage in Kenya is around $25 a week. So Tanzania is $25 a week. So you could imagine when wheat prices because of Ukraine or global supply chain or Bidenomics, whatever you want to call it. The rising fuel prices, that affects everything, right? That affects the price of tomatoes and every good and service that's out there. So I know we want to mostly talk about the U.S. and what we're doing in the U.S., but when you take a step back and you realize in a lot of these other countries, it's virtually gotten to the point of life or death. And I think the average politician, again, I know we're going to beat on President Biden, with his administration and what they're doing. But I do believe that the vast majority of politicians in the U.S. and other parts of the world, they really have no clue. They have no concept. So, when we talk about, well, how do you protect your wealth? You really have to think, well, in a sense, I have to outthink the game that's going on here, right? We're in a game where the government and governments are forcing you to basically spend everything you have on prices that are going up and up and up. So, what do you do with any disposable income you have? Once you hit hyperinflation, the only thing to do is spend it immediately, because tomorrow the value of that money will be worth less than it is today. And, that's the classic example in, the Weimar Republic in Germany, which is when my grandfather migrated from Germany to the United States, where, in 2 years, an ounce of gold went from 100 Reichsmarks to 100 trillion Reichsmarks. And people would get paid twice a day because, your wife or your mother or somebody would have to come collect your paycheck at noon and go out and quickly spend it, because if they didn't, the purchasing power would be less tomorrow. So, you were getting raises, and that's what we're seeing now, right? Everybody's jostling for raises. They want the minimum wage to go up, regardless of the productivity. which is really what wages have to be based on, right? The productivity of people, not government mandates. But prices are sure pay's going up, and if you don't like your job right now, maybe you can jump to another job and make more. The problem is that prices are rising faster. So you might get a
Yes.
5 or 10% raise, but the reality is between devaluation of your currency, which is what's happening, and inflation, you're going to have a hard time keeping up with that. And I know what the government's official numbers are, but I think the actual numbers probably are already putting inflation in the 20+% range, maybe higher, depending on the goods and
if
services.
you go to John Williams' Shadow Stats, where you can get a real read on inflation, you and I both admire him. He says it's up near 20% now, and so they economic, the GDP growth for the past 6 months, zero.
Yeah, I know they're toying around with trying to say that we're not in a recession, but I mean, again, you look at what you're making, look at what things cost. I don't that often go to the grocery store because my wife is fortunate enough to take care of most of that for me. But when I do, maybe it's because I don't go every day. But if I go and a couple weeks later, a month later go, I'm just shocked. I mean, I go and pick out, something normal, hamburger meat, and I'm like, hamburger meat's like $9 a pound. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It just it just hits you. And of course, I do buy gasoline a lot, so I see and feel those price increases. And one of the things I like to do when I travel is calculate what the price of fuel is in dollar terms and gallon terms. Like here in Austria, for example, fuel's price per liter, it's about €2 per liter. So in real rough terms, that's about $8 per gallon. So, it's even worse here. And home heating oil, because of Russia, is going through the roof. I think it's up 50% this year. So, that's the backdrop. That's the environment where we have to think, well, how do I protect my nest egg? And if I let it sit in cash, well, we know that's going nowhere. If I buy government bonds or corporate bonds, it's probably not going to outpace inflation. What if I buy stocks and the bubble bursts tomorrow and then my money goes down? So those are the fears and the stresses and the worries. We've talked a few times on the show about things like cryptocurrency. Well, that's really down too, right? So, I mean, everything across the board is just down, down, down. So, that's a very long-winded answer to get ready for your question, which is, what do people realistically do? And, I think it depends on whether you have disposable cash that you can use to make investments or whether you're trying to leverage and borrow money. I'd be very cautious to borrow money right now because, interest rates are going up. Real estate is one of my favorites that we like to talk about a lot on the show. But, if all of a sudden your mortgage is going to be 6.5%, then you have to look and say, well, between my mortgage, my interest, my taxes, what am I going to be able to get a real return? And that's very specific to the markets.
Yeah, look at that. I'm glad you hit on mortgages. Look at the mortgage payment increase per month since Joe Biden took office. That's it. So how can anybody possibly want to invest in property in the U.S. when you're going to have those kind of payments on it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have 3 sons that are 26, 25, and 23, and they've been looking at buying some property together, maybe to live in, but really more as an investment. And they're saying, Dad, like all of a sudden, like even with 3 incomes, which they have, the amount of house that they can really afford to look at has just shrunk dramatically because as the interest rates go up, the bank calculates it the opposite way, which is how much of a mortgage can you really afford based on your income and the value of the house. And they've seen on let's say a 20-year mortgage, the amount of house they can afford has already gone down by several $100,000. So, 6 months ago, let's say by pooling their money, they could buy a $600,000 or $700,000 house, and now it's like half that. So, it's a tough to be in that. I do still like real estate, particularly in certain markets. There are other markets where I think do I think the New York market will eventually come back? Yes, I do. There's always going to be people in other parts of the world that just aspire to own New York real estate. But in the short run, everybody's bailing as quickly as they can from New York. So New York City, the values are already falling rapidly. Whereas if you look at a place like Florida, it's the opposite. All that money's leaving New York. It's leaving California. It's leaving these high tax blue states, and it's flowing to the red states. But I think coming back to the point you alluded to a minute ago, in other countries, real estate is still much more attractive. And here in Europe, for example, interest rates in euros are still very, very low. Interest rates are like 1.5%. The euro has fallen dramatically against the dollar. It was, a year ago it was about 125. Now I think it's 104. So, the dollar's actually gained, your purchasing power has increased by almost 20% here, low interest rates. So, it's not a bad time to look at real estate in markets like this. In Austria, for example, there's no property tax. So if you can borrow money at a low rate and, maybe rent it or live in it, and you're not paying taxes along the way. You pay tax when you buy and when you sell, but there's not annual property tax. That makes it much more attractive. But for most of our viewers, I think, and we hit on this theme frequently.
Uh-oh. We've lost Joe here for a second.
Yeah.
There we go.
I hope you can tape it back together. Anyways, the call was coming out on my phone. I apologize for that. But anyways, the reality is there's still other parts in the world, mostly heading north-south. And I should say north and south, because there's actually some good values in Canada as well. But of course, Canada is a very high tax state. I think in the most recent whole COVID episode, they in some ways proved themselves to be more tyrannical and more prone to martial law and lockdowns than even the United States. So, but at the same time, a lot of their growth over the years has been fueled by Asia, and that investment has not come back. Their Asians have not come back to Canada, at least in the short run. So yes, there's the values in Canada, but really what we're talking about is south of the border. And, again, it's isolated. You could go to a place like Cabo San Lucas, where, that's been bought up by tourists for the last 30 years, and you're going to pay California and Florida prices in Mexico. But there are other parts of Mexico. Then you move down into Belize, one of my favorites.
Yes.
Move over to Costa Rica, Panama. I mean, you get Ecuador, Colombia. Some people might argue with me about Colombia right now, since a very left-wing,
they just elected their own Maduro. They just elected their own. They looked over at Venezuela and said, "Okay, we'll have one like him."
Yeah.
What the hell's going on out there?
Well, that's I don't know. It's a crazy anomaly, but yeah, I fear for that, because that's what happens a lot of time. The left wing, they get elected democratically, but they don't leave democratically. And I have a lot of very good friends in Colombia, and the political system is very divided, just like it is in the U.S. and other countries. But with the election, I think what really happened was a lot of the people on the center right were kind of apathetic, and they stayed home. And it's kind of like a lot of people say that the best thing that Trump did was vitalize the Democrats, right? I mean, people disliked him so much that they all came to the polls, and obviously his supporters came to the polls too. In Colombia, I think it's a question where the center right was largely apathetic. They just weren't all that excited about the candidate, and but most of my friends are all lawyers, doctors, business people, and the last thing they would ever imagine could happen would be electing a Marxist FARC, rebel leader to power.
Let me ask you this: at this point, and if you don't want to say, I understand, but are you telling those clients and friends you have in Colombia? I mean, you're America's #1 asset protection attorney, okay, in the world. I say America, but you travel the world. Are you telling those folks down there who are high net worth individuals that, folks, we need to sit down and talk about protecting your assets, because you just elected a Maduro?
Yeah, I think that'll happen. I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody expects anything to happen overnight, right? I mean,
Right.
these policies generally come along in phases and stages. But yes, if he proves to be a Maduro, if he starts confiscating, nationalizing properties, then the first thing that'll happen is the upper middle class and wealthy will leave. Um, I just saw a great chart yesterday. Somebody sent me. I think it was one of your viewers, and it was the. I'll have to send it to you. Maybe we can have it on the program next week. But it was a chart showing migration of millionaires around the world, and it was since January 1 of this year. And as you can expect, the number one sort of country where people were leaving was Russia, over 15,000 millionaires. China was number two at
Right.
10,000. India was number three at 8,000. I think Hong Kong was number four at 3,000. So you had, four countries where you had, 35 plus thousand millionaires leaving. And then you had other countries where they were going. And I find it kind of interesting because the U.S. was a slight net increase, but only slightly. I mean, in the olden days, if 35,000 millionaires left those parts of the world, you would have expected 2/3, 3/4 of them to show up in the
Right.
U.S.
Right.
The U.S. was up about 1,000 millionaires, but I think the outflow of millionaires is pretty great as well. So nothing in Colombia is going to happen overnight, but it'll be interesting to watch if they start trending towards what happened in Venezuela. That'll be the writing on the wall. I love that index because it shows the old adage is money flows to where it's treated best. And when
Yeah.
you see the
Yeah.
millionaires getting on planes and leaving, that there's problems, and those problems will only get bigger as that money leaves. And I kind of fear for the U.S. in that regard too. Not only for money leaving, but the entrepreneurship. That's where we really have a lead over every other country in the world. And that is, we've always been innovators, entrepreneurs, the creators of new technology, new industry. And when that brain power leaves and the money leaves,
Yes.
then you'll see a very quick plummet to the bottom, both with our currency and what have you. So,
I
coming
think
back to, go ahead. Sorry.
that's just, I just want to insert that is to me, a brilliant observation, the brain drain, because so few people look at it. When I was a kid in the 60s, England experienced the brain drain. Okay. And I'm not talking about the Beatles leaving. I'm talking about real brains. And they've never been the same. And I'm glad you brought that up, that we're now, you're going to see a brain drain. If I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I want to go where I'm welcome. And to me, that's the Central and South American countries. That's just my opinion. What do you think?
No, I think it is. I mean, those countries, for the most part, leaving countries like Venezuela out of the mix, for the most part, whether it's because they just are freer, or maybe it's just because they're poorer and can't try to, be this giant big brother that controls everything. I mean, that's it in the U.S., right? We have so many laws. If you look at collection of the U.S. federal code, I mean, it fills up a whole library of laws, thou shalts and thou can and thou can't. I mean, we just legislate everything, and it makes it hard. I think a few weeks ago we talked about, opening up a restaurant in New York City, and the handbook that the city gives you that you have to comply with is 10,000 pages. So, you're a poor immigrant from Vietnam and you want to open up a Vietnamese restaurant, how do you do that? But it's interesting. We obviously work with clients that are leaving mostly for financial reasons. Once you expatriate, you leave the U.S. tax system. That's probably the number one reason people leave. There's always people that say they leave for political reasons or other reasons, maybe marriage, maybe they want to run for political office in another country that doesn't permit that. Boris Johnson, for example, the Prime Minister of the UK, is a dual citizen, and he got in a bit of a fight with the IRS, and ended up giving up his U.S. citizenship after he paid a couple £1 million on his inheritance from his parents. So he was particularly shocked that he had to pay U.S. Income and estate tax on properties he received from his parents in the UK. But that's the way our tax system works. So you have a
Yeah.
lot of you have a lot of people leaving for money reasons. But just maybe a month or so ago, I got a call from a 27-year-old young lawyer, and we were just having a one-on-one conversation about the same stuff. And he said, I'm really thinking about leaving, and I'm thinking about expatriating. And I said, well, why are you thinking about that? And he said, I don't see the opportunity here. And two, I don't want to try to build something where the government's always going to be after me to try to take whatever I make and whatever I earn and whatever I build. He said, I feel like I want to expatriate now. Well, I have nothing, right? They can't really tax me on leaving now because I don't have really much. And whatever I build, I want it to be mine. I don't want it to be, half the government. So, that's something. In 33 years of practicing law, I've never had that conversation before. So it's alarming. And
It's revealing.
that's what people should be worried about. If a 75-year-old millionaire wants to leave, take his money, that's one thing. But when a 27-year-old says they want to leave, well, that's a whole different problem. And I think that's the problem we're in now with the current Biden economy.
And it's very revealing. And let me grab a piece of paper here, because you were talking about property investments. And, all our viewers are Offshore Club members, and I know a lot of escape artist members as well. If you invest offshore right here, and I know you're very familiar with that because you and Mike Cobb built that development. That's Grand Pacifica. A luxury home there costs a tenth of what it does in the United States. A tenth. I mean, that's, to me, that is protecting assets.
Yeah, of course, because you can save and invest more if you spend less on that. It's not only the cost of acquiring property, it's the cost of maintaining it, because again, taxes are lower, non-existent. Having a full-time maid, gardener, driver, housekeeper, whatever, is a fraction of the cost. I had a conversation with a client of mine the other day who moved to Panama. He's a lawyer, and he moved his 94-year-old father with him, who is suffering from dementia and a variety of health problems. And he hired 3 full-time nurses to work 8-hour shifts around the clock. They have some people that come in to give them a day off on the weekends. And he told me for all 3 nurses, he pays about between $800 and $850 a month. And he said, I come home from work, my house is clean, somebody's fixed dinner. If my dad's in a good mood and good spirits, we sit at the table and visit and talk. And if something goes wrong and he's not feeling well or whatever, he's got a full-time nurse to take care of him if he wakes up in 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. And just think about what that would cost. I mean, you would be buying, some kind of acute care nursing home in the U.S. to get anything that resembled that.
Oh my God!
And you'd probably be looking at $15,000-$20,000 a month at a minimum,
easily.
And it wouldn't be that kind of personalized care. So, I think you bring up a great point, which is the best way to save and protect assets, for starters, is to not have to spend them. So when you can move to a country where the cost of living is lower, one of the things a lot of my clients like about Central America is, there's very little processed food. You don't have a lot of chemicals in your food, no processing. It's, it's very natural, whole, organic. I'm sure you've talked more with somebody like Mike about this, but when he lived in Nicaragua, I know he got a big, 50-pound sack of fruits and vegetables delivered to his house once a week, and it was like $8. So
it's yeah.
So when you start doing that, then all of a sudden you have a different problem, which is, what do I do with all the money that I'm not spending? I'm not spending a fortune on clothes because I wear a lot less clothes. I'm not spending a lot of money on heating, particularly in the winter. My big house in Western Pennsylvania, it's not uncommon January, February, March to have $1,000 gas bills. So, when you move to Central America, those go away. Cost of food goes away. Cost of maids and nurses and drivers and gardeners goes down dramatically. And, let's also remember that you're having a very positive effect in these parts of the world too, because, you think that, hey, this is really cheap, but for the people that you're giving those jobs to, those are good paying jobs in those countries, and they wouldn't have them if you weren't there. So, a lot of, like in Nicaragua, a lot of my wealthy Nicaraguan friends, they say it's almost a duty to, to have a staff for that reason. I tell them, well, my wife doesn't really like people in her house. She really prefer to do it herself. And they're like,
Right.
yeah, but think of those jobs your wife's taken away from locals by having that attitude. And it's just a different way of looking at things. But yeah, real estate, there's no doubt. If you live there, you're going to benefit from the cost of living. If you don't live there, you have the opportunity to buy low. I think prices are only going to go up. There's more and more people that want to move there and rent as well. I have a lot of older clients, and they say, I don't really want to buy, but they're totally happy to rent, and they'll rent year round. Anybody can rent their property in the high season, but can you rent it in the low season? But people will take 6 and 12-month leases, and you can buy a property and let renters pay the mortgage, and that's an excellent way to build up equity, again, particularly for young people that have a lot of time on their side.
It's I'm glad you said the young people, because a lot of times when we talk, a lot of the folks, I know a lot of the Offshore Club members are 50 and above, but more and more we're getting the millennials and the younger people. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm also glad we've come full cycle. You started out talking about the needs of the people in Africa, and we're finishing up here talking about how much you can help the needs of the people in Central American countries just by investing there, just by living there, by hiring a maid or a groundskeeper.
One of the things that's always kind of amazing, all of the aid agencies and things that are running around handing out money, and that's good. I mean, I'm not taking anything from them. I've worked over the years with a lot of different charities, the Catholic Church, Rotary, Brothers Brother, bringing medical equipment and things like that. But there's a difference between, it's the old adage from the Bible about giving a man a fish or teaching a man how to fish. And you just see the pride that goes along with working and earning a paycheck. I mean, I had the privilege of attending the ECI Christmas party last year, and I met a lot of staff, including gardeners and maids, and they had their spouses with them, their children, and there was a whole community there, drinking Coke and having pizza and, listening to music. And, there was a lot of pride, and the jobs meant a lot to them. It's not like in a lot of places in the States where people take a job, maybe in the service industry, and it's like a temporary job, until they get something better. I mean, people really aspire to have these types of service jobs. They're glad when they have them, and they don't ever want to give them up and leave. So, if you go to that part of the world and you hire a maid, I promise it'll be, the best maid you've ever had. They know that there's 50 other people that want that job. So they're going to bend over backwards, and they'll really, really appreciate having it. So yeah, you can protect your assets, spend less money, have a higher quality of life, and really help countries like Nicaragua, like Panama, like Belize, develop in a positive way without, government giving handouts. You give out a handout, tomorrow you just have to do it again. You give somebody a job, all of a sudden they can, pay for themselves. One of our long time employees at ECI just sent his kid to college in the States. And we're really, really happy for him and proud of his son. And, and he really has high expectations for his son, and we're very happy to be able to see that happen.
So I guess the bottom line on this is that you can protect your assets with your offshore investments, with your offshore purchases. It's a chance to the best of both worlds. You're doing good while doing well.
You summed it up, Carter. I think you
Joel, thank you. This has been terrific, and I appreciate it. This has been a great report on folks. This is what's coming down the pike, and Joel's helped you prepare for it. Joel, thank you.
Thank you.
Where are you going to be next week?
Next week I'm going to be in the Azores, Portugal. We can talk about how Portugal has made it completely tax-free, the entire crypto industry, which is attracting people. Remember, I mentioned to you earlier about where the millionaires are going. Number 5 on that list was Portugal.
That's right.
Something about 2,000 millionaires are headed there. So, yeah, it's a great country to keep your eye on. And ECI is going to have a big announcement there as well. So I'll be connecting with my good friend Mike Cobb. Maybe we can do the show together.
All right. Thank you very much. There you heard it, folks.
All right.
Last week, Africa. This week, Vienna. Next week, the Azores. And the Azores are a great investment, by the way. So, folks, there you got the final word on how to protect your assets, how to do good while doing well. So let's do this thing.